You are now watching Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to the channel. Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 10 best decks in format. We've had a lot of events. I mean, for myself, I ran the late night event on Monday. I ran a late night event that same Monday, another one on Friday, and I ran the late night regionals. Of course, we've had other major events such as the Liam Kid event, the On Guard events, and more. That being said, lots of stuff, lots of changes. There's quite a few new decks that have entered the list that were not in the top 20 decks entirely. Sure, a large portion is not going to change from the top 5 decks or so, but a lot of changes and a lot of decks entering, and maybe the metagame is going to shake itself up. If you're not really into that, I have started covering a lot of Brilliant Stars decks, so stay tuned on the channel for that. But if you are excited for the top 10 Fusion Strike decks, you are in the right place. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what your predictions are for the top 10 decks in the comments below. Put them in there and I'll get back to every single comment. That being said, let's get it. Starting it off with a splash at number 10, we have SUICUNE Ludicolo, and we have this new build from Kim Pubega, who was able to make the #1 seed at the late night regionals and ended up making top 8 at this event. You can see with the heavier line on the Lotad, Ludicolo, Rare Candy, and Cross Switcher that it might breathe some life into this deck that was otherwise dying. They seem to have no problem going through Mew VMAX, so this is definitely a deck that I want to kind of discover and understand in the near future. For those who don't understand how this deck works, you have SUICUNE, which is largely a popular Pokemon in our metagame. You build it up with Melanie, attack with Blizzard Rondo, but Ludicolo allows you to use Enthusiastic Dance, increasing your damage output. We might see even cards like this see success, or a similar deck like this see success in Brilliant Stars, because not only do we have SUICUNE, we also gain Entei V and Raikou V, and they both are Pokemon that have a similar attack to Blizzard Rondo, except they're fire and lightning type respectively. Will this end up being a good deck in this metagame for the rest of the Fusion Strike meta? We'll have to find out. I don't know where this deck's going to be placing, but it seems really interesting. A lot of players got a lot of results for it after the event. Let's see how it goes. Coming in hot at number 9, and again, not on the top 20 list before, is INTELEON VMAX. I mean, I guess I should say that not before, not in the previous week. INTELEON VMAX really shot up to success this past Friday with Gato taking the late night event as the champion. Something that we all didn't really expect. The goal of this deck is to Gmax Spiral, rip that Rapid Strike energy back to back, and loop Cheryl throughout the course of the game. Octillery can search through the pieces, Quick Shooting Inteleon makes everything happen, and Path to the Peak can certainly slow your opponent down. Is this deck relevant in the format again? Honestly, I'm not sure if it was a 1 of occurrence or a 2 of occurrence or here and there. I think INTELEON VMAX is quite a hot deck, and I do think it has a little bit more success behind it, or potential for success, than most people think. So maybe if the format grows or continuously changes, this deck might make it back up to the top. But similar to SUICUNE Ludicolo, when a new deck enters the field, it's really hard to see if players are going to take it under their wings and play it for events, because that's really what allows it to see some success. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily do much. So I don't know, we'll have to see how it plays out. Right now, we're gonna have to see where INTELEON goes, but it's cool to see it back on the list. Very welcomed here. Bringing the darkness down at number 8 is Eternatus VMAX, and this deck was also number 8. So Etern's really, it's been chilling. I don't know where this deck, I don't know how it's getting the placements, to be honest. I think that there's a lot of other better dark decks in format. But you want to know what? It is a strong deck, and I think it gets better with Ultra Ball. I mean, Adventure's Discovery is cool in this deck, but I do think that it is one of those things where Ultra Ball seems really good for this deck when it comes out in Brilliant Stars, so you can search things out. This deck's all about using your Eternal Zone ability, stacking up a big bench, and then hitting for Dread End. We have Galarian Wheezing, and we have Umbreon and Moltres, so we have some cool techs that we could work with and a bunch of Crobats to draw cards. So there's definitely like a great strategy behind it. I think if you're newer to the game, this is really a great deck to pick up, because it's one of those kind of easier to play but has some complex strategies, but ultimately like you're swinging for 270 at the end of the game and stuff like that. So I think Etern's cool. I definitely see this deck like it's either going to stay in a similar spot. I mean, the fact that it's number 8 to number 8 tells me that it's probably appropriately placed. I guess more or less Mew VMAX is a deck that's weak to dark. This is a deck that is dark type. That's all I could really say. but I do think that there are other decks that are better than Eternatus VMAX. Barking it up at number 7, we have Turbo ZACIAN, which was also number 7 last week. So you can see there's a little bit of a stability in this list now. A lot of the decks within the top 10 are at the same spot where they are last week. The only exception is that there was a few other decks that have got into the list, such as adding in the INTELEON deck, or maybe even adding in the SUICUNE LUDICOLO deck. So this deck is really the project of Joshua Sutherland and Christian Stridiron playing the deck and seeing success with it. No one else is really seeing success with it. No one else is really playing it. I just really want to point that out there, that it's really, these results are brought on by a handful of top players in the game pushing the boundaries. Similar to Eternatus VMAX, I think this deck is relatively basic. You have Intrepid Sword, you're ripping energies on a Zacian V, you're drawing cards, and you're blocking VMAXs with Zamazenta V. So you have an attacking option and you have a defensive option. I like adding Crushing Hammers in this deck. I think it's necessary for this particular format if you want to play against Mew. Otherwise, Meloetta's just going to run through your Zamazentas and your Zacians, and you really won't even know what hit you coming. So, do I think this deck is well positioned? No, I think it's okay. But if you are newer to the game, this deck is relatively easy to learn, and it's really cheap to put together, whether it's online or in real life. So I do recommend it for anyone who's new to the game or looking for more of those options to kind of get into physical play or online play. Popping in at number 6, we have Counterbox, or I guess that's the name that I'm really giving this deck. I don't know if I want to call it like SUICUNE and Friends or whatever, because I've seen lists that play small numbers of SUICUNE. We've seen lists that play less Galarian Moltres, baby Galarian Moltres, no Articuno, Inteleon, Zapdos, no Zapdos. I think this is really a cool take on the deck overall, and this is the list, a very similar list that Gabriel Samedo made top 8 with at the late night regionals. So a lot of these results, we saw a lot of big name players bring out some big name decks, because when we're offering a cash prizing and best of 3 regionals experience, you're gonna get the top best players in the game playing their butts off. So this deck's all about having SUICUNE as a basic attacker. You're gonna be using Blizzard Rondo a couple times here and there. I mean, this is the 3rd deck that we have on the list playing SUICUNE, right? So by all means, check those other ones out. There is the link to all those videos in the pinned comment. Again, so if you want a reference video for any of these decks, or for most of these decks, there's some in the pinned comment below with the copy and pastable lists. And I mean, if you're trying to pick up any of these cards, you can go to PTCGOstore.com, plug in code ZLesage5 to save 5% on your order. Gotta get that out of the way. You know what I'm saying? Help support a content creator. You love to see it. That being said, you have a bunch of different attackers that are good for different situations. This one uses some kind of Turbo Articuno Rotom Phone build to make sure that everything happens. So if you're playing against an E-Turn Gengar, Jolteon, you probably want to go Zapdos, rip an energy on it with an Aurora Energy Switch, and maybe Melanie. If they don't have too many Pokemon, you could attack with that. You'd always Ditto back one of these other Pokemon. Galarian Articuno is going to draw cards. Galarian Moltres is going to be good against any of the dark decks like Shadow Rider or VMAX. And SUICUNE, like I said, is a general attacker. Everything looks really cool with this list. Relatively basic, aggressive, but quite effective in the metagame, and really popping in there. You can see a new entrant with 450 CP is just kind of crazy. Single striking it up at number 5, and also at number 5 last week is Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX. This list looks very similar to Gabe Smart's list, who was able to make top 32 at the late night regionals. Single Strike to me has largely just been like a middle of the road deck, and now that it's at number 5, I think it's probably perfectly placed at number 5. It doesn't necessarily have gigantic matchups, like if you place Mew, it's still going to be a tough one because you're a half fighting, half dark deck. But you want to know what? It is one of those things where you kind of have options against most decks in the format, and it's a relatively powerful deck as well. Kind of doing a little bit like where you're okay against Jolteon, okay against Mew. The goal of this deck is to Single Strike Roar to a various bit of your attackers, whether it's Umbreon V, VMAX, Single Strike URSHIFU V, VMAX, and really just kind of tackle matchups how you would tackle them at your own pace. I like to play mix and match with the Pokemon. Umbreon's for the dark type matchups or just for its gust. Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX can go through things like Duraludon VMAX, Zamazenta V, and of course, Single Strike URSHIFU V is very powerful against Eternatus VMAX, Gengar VMAX, etc., etc. I cut the Morpeko from this deck. That's something people might notice. With Mew running Oricorio, the numbers don't really work out for Morpeko anymore. Maybe it's a worthwhile inclusion over the 4th Umbreon V, but I do really like how this list works out. If there's anything, I think this list is probably going to stay at number 5 because our top 5 is looking pretty secure at this point. If you haven't already put a guess in, let me know what your top 4 decks that you're predicting in this video. I want to hear them in the comments below. It also helps boost the YouTube algorithm, so it's a win-win situation. Skyscrapering over the rest of the competition at number 4 is Duraludon VMAX with its Skyscraper ability. So like Single Strike, this deck is staying in the same spot as last week at number 4, and the goal of this deck is just to stop decks that play special energies, heal some damage, and just be a relatively tanky attacking control deck. So you got some crushing hammer elements and all that stuff. I think it's a really cool deck overall, a little bit basic and a little bit dry. This deck needs a little bit of butter for its bread, if you know what I'm saying. I've watched enough stream games where it's G-Max Pulverization, G-Max Pulverization, Crushing Hammer. Did we get heads? But you want to know what? The strategy is effective, and I don't necessarily want to knock a deck that is effective in the metagame. Duraludon has largely remained within the top decks ever since it made it into the top decks from Grant Manley's original performance. So Duraludon, I think it's probably here to stay. If we're looking towards Brilliant Stars format, I do think that the deck might want to add in Arceus V-Star to accelerate those energies, because that's really where this deck is just slow, a little bit methodical, but it is slow. So keep that in mind. I do think this deck is probably going to stay within the top 5 going forward into next week. Soaring into that number 3 spot, and from number 3 last week, is Sableye V. Now, I do want to kind of clear the air with this deck. Last week we had 2 variants of one with Sableye V, no wheezing, one with just wheezing. We've actually just mixed these together. I did predict that a little bit. Most lists run wheezing. I'm now looking at this as one archetype. So anything that runs Sableye, Moltres, Hoopa kind of cards, this is going to be one archetype going forward. The goal of this deck is to really sacrifice prize cards, whether it's Hoopa, Weezings, Sobbles, while you're building up Fiery Wrath and building up these opportunities to swoop in, get some damage on the board, hit them with Sableye V's Crazy Claws. A lot of people ask, what is the cast form for? I like the cast form more than the Tapu Koko. For Free Retreat, it's level ballable. There are other cast forms. This one just happens to have a weakness that is less common for Pokemon that actually matters. So for example, the Rainy Form cast form can get hit with Jolteon's first attack for 40 damage, you get 2 shots. Or maybe it could get hit with a quick shooting Jolteon for 40 damage plus a ZigZagoon. There's some weird situations, but when it comes to building the most optimal decks, I try to look at them all. So yeah, Cast Form has low HP, but I do like that you could search it out with Level Ball. Overall, I think this deck works great in the metagame. It's the best single prize card deck we have. Was really budget before Sableye V started to skyrocket, but I do think this deck is going to get even better with Brilliant Stars coming out in February. So keep that in mind as we kind of approach Brilliant Stars, that I will start bringing them up a little bit more so players can start preparing and building up cards. If you don't have Sableye Vs right now, I totally recommend for you to pick them up. I think it's a great deck, and it's pretty much like one of my personal choices for any event. Now, I think this deck might struggle in the next coming weeks because Mulists are adding an Oricorio, which stops Hoopa to knock out a Meloetta because of minus 20 damage. So 90 minus 20, 70 does not knock out a Meloetta, really causing this deck to have some issues. If that ends up causing this deck to kind of riffle through the metagame, we might see the metagame kind of flip over a little bit, but we'll see you there, and we'll get there once we get there. I think for the majority, this deck's going to probably stay at number 3. Mew's probably going to stay at an undisclosed number because I don't want to leak anything, but we'll see exactly how it goes. Again, all the lists are in the pinned comment. I do want to update this one in the future because I felt the first time that I covered it, I have a much deeper understanding of the deck, and I really want to pass that knowledge on to our Pokemon community. So let's get it. Stay tuned for that one, hopefully in the future if I get time. Zapping its way all to number 2 this week is Jolteon VMAX. Now, this deck has largely stayed as the second best deck in format for well over a month, and we recently saw a gigantic first place finish from Lindsay Rosekoff, my teammate from the Shuffle Squad. It's absolutely awesome. She's jumped into the game, has seen 2 major wins with Jolteon, or I guess 2 large event wins online with Jolteon. And the thing that I really took away from her list is that Escape Rope sounds cracked in this deck. So that's really where I went. I played this deck at a smaller tournament on Friday. I was able to make top 4. I had a Pal Pad instead of the Escape Rope, but I think Escape Rope seems so much better here. The goal of this deck is to use Max Thunder Rumble, hitting 100 damage on the active, 100 damage on the bench. As long as that has damage, you can get that damage with Quick Shooting INTELEON or ZACIAN. And this deck's all about locking your opponent with Path, being a little bit disruptive with Marnie, and drawing as many, taking opportunities, double dipping prize cards and stuff like that. I think this is a relatively skill-based deck. It holds its own against most of the metagame, and Jolteon VMAX seems like it's an absolute kind of crowd, like it's a rock star of a deck. If you don't have the cards already, they just actually printed the new Jolteon V. You can see on the far left, they have the new alternate art box, premium box collection that you could use to get the cards in real life and online. So if you don't have them already, I recommend doing that as long as you can find it at a safe price. This deck might actually go down once Brilliant Stars comes out in the next month or so, because Manaphy is a card that blocks bench damage, but use the Jolteon VMAX as well. You can get it, and I'm sure Jolteon VMAX will adopt to get around any kind of bench barrier type mechanic. Swooping in at number 1 for literally everything since Fusion Strike has come out, Mew VMAX remains the supreme deck in format, the deck to beat, and even in a field where decks try to counter it, with all decks being dark decks, adding Path, crushing hammers, finding ways to beat Mew is incredibly difficult. This deck is largely the best deck in format. There's no other way to put it. If you're able to beat your counter decks and still relatively just crush anything, you can see it's like double Jolteon. Like this, the 2150 CP that I've used, and a lot of people ask how I calculate the CP, so let me kind of explain that for you. I take events size from 4 players all the way to whatever we have at my late night series, which are the largest events in the game, in the 300, 400 player range. Everything has some kind of value for a first, second, top 4, top 8, top 16, top 32, with kickers in between. That being said, Mew VMAX largely has performed the most. It is the most played deck, but it has performed the most as well, and that's really a strong correlation, and it's outperformed any other deck. So you're going to get the most CP per placement from Mew. Sure, sometimes you're going to run into a tournament, hit a couple Sableye V Galarian Weezing decks and get absolutely bopped. Maybe your opponent's going to path you on the first turn, but having the option to use Cross Fusion Strike, copy Melodious Echo, copy Techno Blast, rip through your opponent's deck, accelerate energies, search for whatever you want, accelerate your, get your energies back from your discard pile, do extra damage, reduce your opponent's damage, draw a bunch of cards, loop your Pokemon back in your deck. Like, I could go on and on and on about this deck. No other deck has that much stuff jam-packed into one thing, right? It's like the best, meal deal package all in once. Like, every other combo has fries and a drink. This deck has a bag of chips, a dessert, has a snack meal for tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much jam-packed into one deck, and that's really why it continuously has outs for every single situation. More and more, my testing partner, Cal Connor, and I, we continuously think that adding Oricorio into this deck really might solve the Galarian Weezing matchup. I brought it up a little bit there earlier, how Hoopa can't knock out the Meloetta for the 90 damage. I think that might be huge in that matchup, and I think Oricorio can be huge in other matchups like Jolteon. So overall, I do think that this deck is probably the prime build. Really excited to see how this plays out. Cards that I've considered adding in here are Switching Cups. Not sure how I feel about Great Ball. Might want to change some Rotom Phone counts, but it's really one of those things where this deck is really what you make out of it, and it can be whatever you want it to be. So if you haven't already, pick up the cards from Mew VMAX. It does get a lot of buffs from Brilliant Stars as well, including double turbo energy. So I really don't see how we're not going to see this deck tearing it up for the foreseeable future. It's just absolutely amazing, and I think it's going to be number 1 until at least we get Brilliant Stars, and then even then it still might just be the best deck in formats. And that's what we got going on for this video today, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed learning more about the metagame. I do these videos every single Monday, and if you haven't caught up with me on the Shuffle Squad, you could also check some of my content out on the Shuffle Squad on YouTube, and really seeing exactly what other content I have available. It's all Pokemon TCG related stuff, but I do want to throw that out there. We just passed 9,000 subscribers last time I checked. Maybe things have wiggled around. Sometimes there's a little bit of movement on there, people deciding whether or not they want to sub, but I really appreciate all the support. We are 1,000 away from 10K, and that's going to be absolutely amazing. So I really appreciate everything. Thank you so much, everyone. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up. It does help boost the YouTube algorithm. For me, I might look like a big YouTuber some, but I'm still definitely on the smaller side. I'm 10K or bust, you know what I'm saying? Once we go 10K, we're shooting for the moon, a bajillion subs if possible. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Double check to make sure you haven't. Make sure that your brother, mom, daughter, sister, dog, cousin, neighbor, grandma, whatever, all subscribe to the channel. Let them know about if they want to learn about Pokemon. And stay tuned for a lot of great content this week. I'm back to double uploads. Been crushing those uploads. Takes a lot, but I'm super happy to give back to the community wherever I can. And if you need to know anything else, let me know in the comments. Hit me up in the DMs. I'm all here for y'all. Peace out and have yourself a great one. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.